Hello my dear subscribers, and welcome to the third part of my tutorials. In here, I'm teaching you how to create a computer game, a survival horror in particular. You can say straight away, my approach is very different from the great majority of other teachers. This is because I'm describing the whole process, which includes 3D modeling, animating, texturing, taking a great effort to tackle and reveal the techniques that you would only start to think about probably in a year of practicing. With that said, you'll get familiar and comfortable with using them. After that, we'll be going over the game engine techniques up to the point of complex dynamic structure, the game artificial intelligence. And after that, we are going to focus on sound. Judging by the length of the previous two tutorials, you can probably guess that I'm going to stick with long tutorials. This approach will allow us to tackle many useful techniques and topics, while holding all of this information in a reasonable count of videos. I also would like to point out that my videos must be watched with annotations turned on. This is because I might add even more tips after the lesson was uploaded. And if you like the video, rate it thumbs up and subscribe. That way you'll keep track of all the videos that will be coming out. My name is Igor Aherne, and you are watching the tutorial called How to Make a Horror Game Part 3. In here we'll be doing re-topology on the characters, creating the characters, or at least seeing how they are done in ZBrush, and tackling some more of the texturing, as well as doing the normal maps to add those extra details and save some polygon count. And I'll provide pretty good examples, so you'll be quite amazed. If you are not familiar with normal mapping, you'll be quite amazed with what it can do. So take the annotations on and let's get started. Alright, you just saw the showdown of my scene, and it's a basic mashup of all the models I've quickly done in those couple of days. And this is the kind of scene that I want to put in my game. It has different cages, it has some kind of broken wheels and weak doors that are broken as well, some kind of hut, and you can guess that probably the timing for the game is quite old, somewhere in 15th century. But as you can guess by this skull right here, there is something bad happening. I'm not going to open you the plot because I'm going to release the game on a commercial basis, but basically it's a survival horror game. The player has to run away from evil forces and fight them when he confronts them, and fight them and advance through the game like this. But this is going to be a very scary game. I didn't show you, I showed you on purpose this thing, the crate, which is inside of the house, this one. You can see right there. You can hide into it and play the style of Amnesia game, or the second Amnesia. And actually the Outlast as well, it follows the same principle. You can hide away, but you can't fight monsters with weapons. And this is what's gonna make the game really scary, is if you can't do anything about it, about the monsters. Okay, and but this is the scene where you can just observe some kind of storage place in which you put all of different kind of stuff, logs maybe, wooden planks, and different tools. You can see some of the vegetation growing there. It's kind of mushrooms, and those are just remains of the building that I've put on the background. A couple of bushes there, and you can see the cart from the previous scenes. I've just taken all of the things and stuck them all together. Why I'm showing you this is because you should be able to create something similar using the techniques I've shown you before. This is all done from different objects, like primitives like boxes and spheres and tubes, but modified with editable poly to give it the final shape. And you can see, if I turn on the wireframe on, you can see the topology of the buildings and of the objects. The topology just means it's the word that stands for those kind of lines that form the buildings, and it's quite important terminology because topology should be neat and should be flowing so that you show off all of the details of the things with using as less polygons as possible. So for instance, a quite good example would be over here. When we texture this thing, it will have an appearance of planks that are stuck together in a fence form, pointing upwards, but I've added this extra cut that separates them, and you can guess that probably there's going to be texture of one plank over here and the second one over there, but because I've separated them, it gives this extra 3D look. So pay attention to those details. And also, for instance, on this crate, you can see that first of all there's a skull lying inside, which shouldn't have its color green. It should be brown as everything else, like that. What I was talking about is that you should add little details to all of your objects. So for instance, create a crate following the principle of painting creation that I've described to you in the beginning of the first tutorial. So following this principle, you would just inset and extrude everything inwards. Add details here, maybe connect the top segments with 4 of the other segments, inset them and then extrude to get those planks in the center. Then you would want to connect the planks in a random manner and then take out the edges and bring them outside just to give this random look, because it's kind of destroyed crate. And you perhaps would like to create kind of different boxes. Tweak them around, for instance, to that shape, switch to this main box, and if it's an editable poly, it should be an editable poly, you would just go and attach the box, and that would be your detail, like this one. But that's just an example of what you should be doing. And you can see exactly the same thing over here. It's a plank which gets stuck inside and kind of distorted because somebody was breaking out into this crate and tear apart the parts that it consists of. And you can also see different planks just standing there aside to the crate, but you can't really see them, but they are there. And I've just duplicated them as a element over here, like that, and then shift drag them to copy. And then to detach it from the whole thing, I just went here and click, and then I would have to switch off the element, get out of the editing regime for this model, switch back to this one, and see how the pivot point is there. Just like I've explained to you in the first tutorial, you have to go into the third panel, effect pivot, and center it to the object, like that. And then it should be easier to tweak. Also, you could just put the pivot point down, like so, and then turn around the things from the ground, like that. But we don't need it for now. And you can see different kind of boxes following the same principle. It's very important that you keep in mind, symmetry is your worst enemy. You want to add those little dents into the box, and you would like to make it more like destroyed, perhaps bent outwards, squashed slightly. Make sure that none of the polygons are bent, and if they are, just connect them with segments. Anything that I've explained to you in the first two tutorials, using this knowledge you should be able to create something like this with lots of practice. This thing just follows the same approach as we did the bucket in the first tutorial. As I recall, in the second one we just focus on creating the building, where you should have picked up many of the useful things, especially if you watched it with annotations, because I've added lots of stuff that I've missed out previously. You can see the doors is here, the ladder is there, and it's made of 2 cylinders, and then lots of cylinders stuck up horizontally, and you can see how I've been turning them around, changing the cylinder shape of the legs by just adding the 2 segments across in the editable poly mode, like that. I'll just connect it with 1 segment, and we are in editable mesh, so the options I was looking for are not here. So let's right click it, and the option I was looking for is not actually here because we're in editable mesh. So let's right click and convert to editable poly. What I was saying is that you can go select those edges with this mode turned off, and simply connect them with 1 segment. That will increase your polygon count by a factor of 2 on this leg. It's a good thing if you want to add detail. So for instance, you would just grab hold of this loop and move it aside, the one that you've just created. And this would add this extra detail to your symmetrical ladder and make it look interesting. Then after you've got this, you could even mirror it like so and get a different mirrored image, and then you could probably even copy it like so. Move it aside, just grab and tweak some of the things, and maybe even add a little dent over there like so, for instance, and that way you would get a different ladder out of the first one. You could also just shift drag and copy it, modify it further as well, so you'd have 3 by then. So that's it. And one more little thing that I would like to show you is how I've done this vegetation on the ground. It is very efficient in terms of polygons, because this is just a cylinder with 3 sides and a planar like structure which is bent downwards to make this little cap of the mushroom. The way you would do it is, for instance, from a new object, just grab a hold on the cylinder, grow it like that, and reduce the size to 3. Make sure you don't have any height segments right now. So this is the stamp, and it's very efficient in terms of polygons. If you want to get really technical and I guess professional, you could just right click it and convert to editable poly and add this little band to your stamp and just drag it aside like that. There would be no point in adding a loop here, you must understand this, because if we wouldn't move it to the side, there would be no point in adding this segment, because that way we just have 3 extra polygons which we don't require. But if we make use of this loop by, say, for instance, drag it aside, then it would be a good move. And let's rotate the top one like that, and we got ourselves a pretty nice looking stamp. And the last thing that we should do is just to make a cap for the mushroom, just to go and create a plane, following the principles that I've explained to you in the first tutorial. Just drag it up like that and go into modify, make sure it has got segments set to 1, and right click convert to editable poly. Then with this mode off, we would want to press 2 and connect those segments with 1 again, and following the optimization pattern in the first tutorial, we will just go into the vertex mode, select the sides vertices, and create a rhombus by backspacing those vertices. Then we would want to grab a hold on this vertex, pull it up like so, and I just centered on it by pressing Z, and then perhaps let's see, let's go into the edge mode, right click and choose insert vertex and start inserting the vertices, or simply click over here and start inserting vertices on your edges. And if we press T and check from the top view, our plane is bent, so let's first of all connect the vertices that we've created on the middle parts of our segments. Select all of them, including the top one, and right click and connect. That way we got something round, and we've selected those center ones. Let's press R and scale them like so, and we've got ourselves a round cap. So let's just make it less compressed like that. So select those vertices and drag them down, and we got ourselves a cap for the mushroom. Actually, you see how I have this little thing over here? Press 1 and select the top vertex and chamfer it down like that. You could actually go ahead and start selecting those vertices, those 2, and collapse them, this one and that one, collapse them, and so on until you get the shape that I have over there, like so. And maybe bring this polygon up like so. Attach the stamp to your mushroom, press 5, bring this element on top of the stamp, like so. Maybe scale it up from the center and rotate it down like so. And let's go into local, put it there, and we got ourselves a nice looking mushroom, which can be then duplicated, and maybe then all of the 3 will get combined into one polygon, editable poly. Let's see, attach this one and this one, and then just check on the pivot point for those mushrooms, effect pivot point, center to object. And one final thing you should be always doing with your object is to select it and go into the utilities panel, reset all of the scaling that you've done on the object. If you've done anything of scaling type, and if you haven't, make sure you go into the utilities panel and go and select reset X form and then reset selected. This will reset all of the scaling back to 0, but keep the object unchanged, hopefully. And then you can go back to the modify panel and see that the X form thing is applied to it. So just right click on the X form, just like you would on any of the modifiers, and collapse all. And this keeps the modifier on your model, but you will no longer be able to tweak it and change it, but it's still there. It is time for ourselves to extend our knowledge about creating the models, and so far we've been creating something very simple, like low polygon models. But a further step would be to create something more complex, something like this skull. There is a special program called ZBrush, which allows you to create characters, high polygon models with lots of details. Then utilize this thing in 3ds Max and project the high details onto low polygon mesh, which then can be used in games. This technique will add extra quality to your game and will make your game stand out from the other games. Right now we will be creating a high polygon model, or at least I will show you the techniques of how to make it, and then we will grab the model, re-topologize it in 3ds Max. We'll project the high polygon model on the low polygon model, and this will wrap up the tutorial for today. So the ZBrush interface consists of several panels, and the top one is called Lightbox and can be turned off by pressing over here, and you won't really need it because it just presents you the different objects that developers prepared for you as a demo. The most important panels that you'll be using are Tool and Brush, which is over here, and you can grab any window and grab it by the little circle over here and drag it onto the side, and the sides can be opened by clicking on those arrows on the sides. So just stick your brush over here, get rid of the material, you won't need it right now, grab it by the circle and drop it into the center. It can be always recovered by going into material, grabbing and just sticking it there, but for now we don't need it, so let's get rid of it. ZBrush is a program which allows you to work with very high polygon models and objects, but you can't create huge scenes like you would in 3ds Max. However, you can create very high detailed objects and characters in the form of tools. The tools are over here, and you can start out creating the shape from any of the possible primitives, for instance the Z-sphere. And the Z-sphere is a very interesting tool because it allows us to create the structures like skeletons out of nothing, and then convert this skeleton into a mesh and create a character from there. But right now we would want to create a basic skull, and so with the Z-sphere selected as a tool, we would want to create a Z-sphere in the center of our screen, and if you create several of them, this is no longer qualified as a 3D image, and you would have to clear the canvas by pressing Ctrl-N and create your Z-sphere once again. Then you would want to go into the Edit by pressing T and pressing Q and going into Draw. This way you can rotate around the object by right-clicking anywhere on the scene, and pan around the scene by pressing Alt and right-clicking, and zoom by pressing Ctrl and right-clicking. You can toggle grid view by pressing here, and you can have different types of grid by pressing little section on the floor button, which is X, Y, Z, and you can't probably see it, but it's there, trust me. But I prefer working just with Y over there. Let's lock the rotation from X, Y, Z to just Y, so that we don't rotate clockwise and counterclockwise, but just rotate up and down and around the vertical axis. So switch it to Y, and this will allow us to rotate just like in 3ds Max. And while rotating, let's press Shift and snap to the closest axis. That's quite handy as well. So we can rotate, press Shift, and we'll snap to the top view, and rotate, press Shift, and we'll snap to the side view. If you press X, that will enter you into the symmetry mode, and you can create Z-spheres on the surface of the current Z-sphere by just clicking and dragging out. If it's not in the symmetry mode, you just have to press X to turn it off. Then you'll be just creating it on one surface, on one side. Ctrl-Z to roll back your actions. Let's create something that reminds us of a teardrop shape thing that will suit us as a basis for creating our head. And if you're in symmetry mode, if you see that your pointer has snapped to a green circle, that means that you are going to create only one object in the middle, not two, and that's what we need right now. Let's create a Z-sphere and another one on the second one. Press W and this will switch you from drawing to moving, and pressing E will switch you from moving to scaling, and R stands for rotation. But right now we just need W for movement. Let's grab this Z-sphere and put it here, and let's press E and scale down the bottom one. press W, bring those two down, and just position them in the form that the skull would have. We will shape it out later, so no worries. And once you're ready, you can press A and preview your mesh that you'll have. And A is just a shortcut for going into adaptive scan and going into preview. So once you have your Z-spheres ready, let's press A, and you will see that you have 162 active points. This is nothing, because in ZBrush you usually work with huge amounts of polygons that 3ds Max would freak out to work with. But ZBrush allows us to work with it just fine. Okay, we got ourselves just basic shape of the head, and let's make use of our first brush. Let's press Q and go into draw, and let's click here and select move brush over here. You can either click on it or press M, and then the second button would be V, and it would select the move for us really quickly. Let's make sure that the symmetry is on, and the symmetry is X, or it can also be checked by going into transform and activate symmetry X. And with the symmetry on, press spacebar and increase the size of your brush to about that much and shape out the head in the way you want. When you've shaped out the basic look of your skull, don't forget that this is still Z-spheres. You can press A and go into the Z-sphere mode and alter them, but if you're ready, make sure you've pressed A and you're in the mesh mode. Go and press make polymesh 3D, and this will store your skull as a tool, similar to that Z-sphere. You can switch to another tool and work on the another tool, and then switch back to this one and work on it again. For instance, and you can select the gear and work on the gear. This is a basic primitive. Modify it after it's polymesh. And then you can go and select your skull, focus on it by pressing F, and work from there. But this is not too many points, it's just 162. In Z-sphere you'll be working with much more vertices. So let's go ahead and let's click on the geometry panel and divide the object, or simply press Ctrl D. And if you don't have smooth abbreviation on, then while dividing your model won't get smooth. Sometimes it is useful, but sometimes it isn't. I prefer to have SMT for now. We can shape out even further with the symmetry on. So press X and work with the symmetry. You can press Ctrl Z to roll back your actions, and spacebar for altering the size of your mouse. And now we can subdivide it even further. Press Ctrl D and subdivide it 3 times more. And this is something we can already start sculpting on. Let's go and select clay buildup from the brush, this one, and if you alt click you will inset the clay into your model. And while working with this brush you can press shift, and any brush you can press shift and switch to the smooth brush and start smoothing out the areas. You can also press B for your shortcut towards the brushes. Instead of clicking here, press M and then press V to go into the move and just shape out the eye sockets. You can also mask out the areas of the inside of the eye by just pressing Ctrl and masking out the areas. Perhaps that's too big. Let's reduce the size of the brush and mask out that area. If you Control click inside of the mask, that will soften the borders. And if you Control left click outside of the whole object, that will just invert the mask. This is what we need. If you press W, this is still working with the transpose tools, just like we did in Z-sphere, but it's slightly different. Now if you click on the white area and drag and release on the outside of the model, this will create a line parallel to our current view. This will allow us to click on the white circle inside of the big one in the center and drag out the unmasked area wherever we want. And if you click on the big yellow circle, you can move the transpose tool around. So you have 3 options of modifying the geometry using the move tool. Same with scale and same with rotate. If you click on the empty white area and release your transpose tool on the empty area, you can then rotate around this pivot point by just clicking on the red circle on this side and rotate like so, and rotate around this pivot by just clicking here and rotating around. But we just need to move it inside like so. And then to get rid of the mask, we just need to press Ctrl and left click and drag outside. Press Q to go back into draw, and all of that time we're still in edit. While doing transpose, whatever, we're still in edit mode. If you aren't in edit mode, you'll just be drawing the two-dimensional images. And then you'll have to clear the canvas to get rid of them and start working. So we're always in edit mode for now. Okay, if you look at the skull, you will notice that it has some kind of Y shape lying on the side. So if we go into the clay build-up brush, press spacebar and reduce the intensity and the draw size, we can now start out shaping our Y shape. And then let's go into geometry, delete the lower subdivisions of our model right here, and then we can click on Dynamesh, and this will infuse our model in a box gizmo that projects polygons onto the model, changing the topology slightly. And if you don't have projection on, you will lose some of the details on the object. But at the beginning stages, it isn't important. And with that, we can smooth out some of the parts even further. Actually, over here I need resolution to be slightly bigger, probably 300. We need to change something in the object, and then if we control and left click and drag outside of the model, Dynamesh will update itself as long as it's turned on. And now we can continue working. I really want to get out this Y shape around the eye and the side of the head. And have a look at this. We can mask out this part. Probably that's too big. Mask out this part and control click inside of it. Control click outside of the model as well. To invert the selection, press W, drag out the transpose tool and move this part like so over here. And then control left click and drag to get rid of your selection. Increase the size slightly, go and select trim dynamic and trim out those parts on the side of the head. It is time for us to add the nostrils to our skull. Let's click on the clay build-up, reduce the size, and with the symmetry on, press Alt, inset the model with clay, like so. Press Shift and smooth out the nostrils. And press B to go into your selection of brushes, is a shortcut. Then press M, and from there press V, and select your move brush. Those combinations might be different with different ZBrush versions. Right now a good practice would be to use the Dynamesh, but for that we need to put projection on this time. And we can press Ctrl and drag out, and this will preserve our nostrils in place. To add the cavity for the mouth, you'll have to do the same thing as you did for the eyes. Mask out the cavity for the mouth, like so. Then you would switch to the front view, press W to go into the transpose tool, drag it out in symmetry mode like so, and click on the red circle on the side. But before that you need to control, left click outside of the model to invert the selection, and click on this circle over here and scale it down like so. Then draw another transpose tool over here and scale down your mouth part like so. And bring it down using the center part. You would want to press Q now, press Ctrl and left click and drag outside, and then smooth out all of the parts that are quite sharp right now. And then using your move tool, move back the jaw. Using the clay build-up or clay tubes, just define the jaw like so. Shift and smooth out. And then using the move tool, bring those jaw parts closer to the center. reapply Dynamesh once again, and finally let's add teeth to our mouth. To do this you have to close the geometry and we have to go into the subtools panel over here. Make sure this is selected and go and click append and select the Z-sphere. Switch to Z-sphere in the subtools panel. Press E and scale it down to a size of a tooth. Let's switch our view to the side view, position it here, switch to the front view and position it to the side. Scale it down and draw another Z-sphere on top by pressing Q, clicking on the surface of the Z-sphere. Rescale them if needed. And then when you're ready, press A and have your tooth ready. You can then change its shape using the move tool and flatten it out like this. You can press R and rotate it the way you want to be in the mouth. And to do this we have to look from the above. But when we do this, the top of the head doesn't let us. So we'll switch to the top of the head, focus on it, left click dragging, we will cover the top part of the head like so, and press Alt and then release the left button. And we'll cut out the piece of the head temporarily, but just so that we can see where to position our tooth. Switch back to our tooth in the subtool panel and rotate it and position it where we want it to be. We can then select our top part and Control Shift click outside to bring it back, and then we would want to go and with it selected go into the Z plugin and subtool master over here and click merge and delete extra subtools. This will merge them into two, and then we'll have to click OK twice and have our new model ready for us. We can now press W and Control click and mask out with the transpose tool the tooth by just clicking on the tooth and then dragging on the other part of model. And then we can press Control and click on the center circle of our move tool and drag out our tooth and make a copy. Do it a couple of times and have several tooths there. And don't forget to rotate them the way you want. Perhaps press again Control Shift and Alt and mask out the top part of the head, and then you can position your teeth the way you want with rotate and position. When we open Max, you can see that I've already imported the model, the high polygon model, into our project. And if I press F4, you can see how many of polygons it has. It is way too many. And we cannot use this type of model in games. We would have to have something much simpler. This is way too many polygons. And we have to create a model which is gonna be much lighter on the polygon count and on geometry, but the one that would have the same geometry flow as this high polygon model. And the way to do this is to work with the graphite modeling tools that the 3ds Max provides. We're going to be creating an exact copy, but much simplified one, on top of this skull, and it will have a much nicer flow of polygons than this model has. Having such a low polygon model, we can then use it in games with no problems, and we can then actually store the details of that high polygon model onto our low polygon model and use it in games. And it will adhere to the lighting as needed. Everything is going to be looking nicely. But for now, we need to create this low polygon model, and we will be doing this using the graphite modeling tools. So select the high polygon model, and for our sake just call it max skull. Max stands for maximum number of vertices. And then we would want to go to the graphite modeling tools freeform, and if you don't see the graphite modeling tools, probably you need to click on this little arrow over here. So go into the freeform, pick on surface, so we're going to be creating another object on surface of the selected one. Let's click on here and on pick, and pick our high polygon model. Then we would want to go to the poly draw and click make new object. This creates a new empty editable poly that doesn't have any polygons or vertices in it. It's just an empty container. So let's rename it to min skull. And in this min skull we will be creating polygons that flow along and stick to this high polygon model that we've selected as a reference over here. So to start out shaping our low polygon model, we have those three options to work with. They are step build, that allows us to lay down vertices and build polygons between them. There is extend, that allows us to extend the existing polygons into another polygons. And there is optimize, which allows us to stick together vertices, delete any kind of edges or polygons if we need so. Create our first polygon by going to step build and laying down first 6 vertices. Now all we have to do to create those 2 polygons is to click shift and left drag between the vertices. We can adjust the position of vertex in any of those 3 modes by just clicking Ctrl Shift Alt and adjusting the position of the vertex as needed. And we can continue placing down the vertices and shift left click and dragging between them to create the polygon. We just need to work on the right part of our face, or the left one to be precise, because the other half is going to be reflected since our skull is symmetrical. So let's explore further and go into the extend mode, and with its help we can create polygons in a different manner. If we press shift and we click on one of the polygons, we can drag out and create other polygons like so on surface of the high polygon model. We can then press Ctrl Shift Alt and adjust the vertices position. They will also stick to the high polygon model. And make sure that your offset is higher than 0, because otherwise your polygons are going to be in line with your high polygon model and you're not going to be able to see them. And you can also press Alt, grab a vertex and drag out polygon like so. But be careful, because such polygon will have a vertex, the end one that you've just created, which doesn't stick to the high model. So you need to press Ctrl Shift Alt on this vertex, left click, and it will stick to the high polygon model. So this can be a trap for the newcomers, but hopefully you will avoid it now. And if you press Ctrl Shift, you can then click on the polygons and drag out the whole loop polygons, the whole ring. If you press F4, you'll see how your geometry flows more easily. And one more interesting thing is that if I create more of the polygons on top of the head, you will see that they start to gather together. As funny as it sounds. The flow of those polygons will be so that they will start to crumple, become crowded, and the way around this is to loop them together. So let me show you in a second. Check this out. You can see that this loop already goes towards here, and this loop tends to go towards there. It's not going to be very nice if there's going to be squashed polygons over here. So what we can do instead is to grab this ring and loop it so that it goes visually here to the left. Let's reposition the vertices. And in that way we can now have this ring go naturally to the left like this. And this is a very good example of how you can get rid of those loops that are approaching each other. So now all you have to do is to go into step build and lay a polygon over there, and you'll have your nice ring going around, and then you can continue working and creating extra polygons. If you see this kind of cut in your topology, you can fix it by going into optimize and pressing shift, clicking on the vertex and snapping it to the closer one, and then you can reposition other vertices as needed. And if your model needs 2 polygons instead of 1 over here, you can always fix it by, for instance, having this big polygon. You can always fix it by doing this. You can go into Graphite Modeling Tools and go into Swift Loop and lay down a loop. Don't forget to turn it off, and you can switch back to freeform, and don't forget to reposition your vertices using one of the methods. So Control Alt Shift and reposition your vertices on the surface of high polygon model, but this big one was saved. The rule of thumb is to avoid all of the triangular pieces and stick with quads. The hardest part will probably be for you to go around the eye cavity, but following this technique of looping around will get you out of the trouble. Also, it's going to be pretty difficult for you to figure out how to do the teeth, but this is the same part. There shouldn't be any difficulties. Just create polygons along the teeth and then point them inwards and just loop out any kind of rings that tend to get close to each other. Re-topology is one of my favorite parts in 3ds Max because sometimes it can be very tricky and frustrating, but when you find this exact direction which you should send the loop at and it works, it's just a great feeling. And for example over here, you don't need to create an extra swift loop over here, although you could, and then have this bottom polygon going down like so, and then this polygon going out like that. Instead, you can actually go into the freeform, go into step build, and lay down two vertices over here, create a polygon here, and create another polygon there, instead of doing that. Put two vertices here, lay down a polygon, lay down another one, and suddenly you have another loop which goes over there. And this one isn't triangular and isn't a pentagon, it's just a quad, and a very nice looking quad. I've spent some time retopologizing the object, and here is my final result. You see that I've done one half of the object. Observe how I've done my eyes over here. You can see that the loops are going like so, and exiting through the bottom. The upper ones tend to go down, 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 and exit as well here, up there, as well as going down like so. Quads are pretty interesting to observe, and you should always pay attention to those rings and how they flow. Well, there is one problem over here clearly. You see that there is a pentagon and a triangle over here, and the way to fix it would be to get out of the step build by right-clicking somewhere on the scene, press 1 and connect those two vertices, remove this one, connect those two, and remove this one, and then go back into the step build, press Ctrl Alt and reposition your vertices to the desired position. And now it's time for us to mirror the left half to the right half. Left one because like so. And to do this, all we have to do is go into the front view, press Z and apply the modifier called symmetry onto our low polygon mesh. And we need to go open it up and select the mirror sub option, press W and change the mirror's position somewhere about here. And you might need to play around with the settings of where the mirror is depending on which angle you are looking at, and sometimes you even need to flip it, but in my case we don't have to. Position it somewhere where you want it to be, and so that it flows along with the geometry, and you can increase the threshold by about that much, and all that it does is it stitches the vertices together. So watch out where you place it, because if you overdo it, your model will get this kind of problem where it gets all of the vertices stitched together on the edges. So let's get out of the orthographic mode by pressing P and go into perspective, centering by pressing Z, change the position of mirror even closer to something about that much. Even increasing the threshold might sometimes distort the vertices, like this one over here, and not capping all of the required ones. So you can even go into editable poly, press 1 and select those vertices, move them to the side closer to the parallel line, or you can select all of them together at once, but be very careful when selecting them like so, and it's best done in the front view in the orthographic by pressing F. Press R and scale them in the horizontal axis, and then you can go into symmetry and apply the symmetry without even a threshold. Well, a little threshold will be nice to weld the vertices, like so, but nothing serious. And you have your retopologized skull. Congratulations! If we right click on the symmetry and collapse all, the symmetry modifier will no longer be editable, and if we go to perspective and rotate around the low polygon skull, which is a min skull, we can observe how it's made. We can also move it out from the side and compare it to the previous one that we had. Press F4 to get out of the edged mode and observe that the geometry is pretty much preserved. And now the rest of the thing that we need to do is just to save the details of the skin, so-called texture, but not texture in the forms of material or anything, but texture in the form of bumps on the skin. So we can preserve those details and scratches and store them in a texture size file, which can be JPEG or Targa, whatever we want. Stick it onto here and have those details shine under the light. But before we do this, let's improve our low polygon model slightly more. Before we do anything, we need to make sure that all of the polygons on it are in the smoothing group number 1. And this smooths them out nicely. We can already export this model to the Unity, but before we do this, let's go into Utilities panel, and as always, go into the Reset X form, Reset Selected, go into the Modify panel, collapse the X form down. This will store this modifier in the history, but we will no longer be able to alter it in any way. Go into the Hierarchy panel, click Effect Pivot Point, and Center to Object. Now your model is almost ready to be exported, but let's have a look how it looks in Unity. Export selected, and let's save it as, first of all, save it on desktop and save it as Skull Unity Tutorial in an FBX format. We don't need any kind of animation, nothing like this. Press OK and export this min skull. We can open Unity, and hopefully you're familiar with Unity, but if you aren't, it's very simple to 3ds Max. You have this thing reminding you of a view cube, which you can rotate around. Similar thing happens in Unity. If you click on this cube, you can get isometric view or perspective view. Let's just create a game object like a plane, and we can focus on it just like in ZBrush by pressing F and Alt left click to rotate around it, to orbit around it. This is a project panel which can be detached and stuck anywhere where you want. Sometimes it's here, sometimes it can be there, and sometimes hierarchy is here and the project is on the left. So play around until you get something that looks like mine. We will have our inspector here, our hierarchy on the left, project on the bottom, scene view in here, and game view on the window that is behind the scene. So as we create the plane, we can now zoom onto it by right-clicking and pressing W to go forward. And while right-clicking, you can navigate around the scene much like you do in the computer games. And as soon as you release the right button of the mouse, you no longer can move around with the WASD keys. You can move the objects by dragging them with the arrows, or by dragging them using the plane to change their position between the planes. And so far we don't need a plane. And also let's go ahead and create game object point light and bring it up like so. And you know what, let's zero out the position on the light like so, and zero out the position of the plane like that. Press F and focus on the plane in the scene view. Click our point light, and we forgot to zero out the X coordinate. Focus on the light and it's right there. Bring it up so that it shines above the plane, and we can click on the assets folder in our project view. Those are the folders that we have in our project where we can store our assets and store our imported objects. We don't need this, let's delete it. And we have our assets folder over here. If we right click, we can create anything: scripts, folders, materials, or shaders. For now we just need one folder. Let's call it imported objects. And actually let's do this way, and materials. And while being in this folder over here, we can import new asset, which is our saved skull from before. Over here we can click and drag it onto the scene, and the scale should be set to 10 like so. And you can see that there is nothing special about this skull at the moment. It is a very low polygon model, and if we change the direction of the light, nothing happens to it. Well, you can see that slight change in shadows occurs, but nothing really serious and interesting. Yes, it has some kind of nostrils, and it has the two holes for the eyes, but it doesn't have those scratches and uneven surfaces, and this is what we want to add to it. This is called normal mapping. However, this is a low polygon model. We've done a very good job on simplifying that high polygon mesh, so we can use this low polygon model in our games. And let's jump back to 3ds Max for now and delete the skull for now as well, because this skull at the moment doesn't have any UV coordinates mapped out. And following the techniques of the second tutorial, we need to map out the skull using the unwrap modifier. With the skull selected, with the main skull selected, let's go into the modify and let's select unwrap UVW. And well, the guess of 3ds Max isn't very bad, but still it's very far from what we would want to have. Just as promised before, I'm going to teach you how to unfold the model properly using the seams, because in first tutorial we let 3ds Max guess in which way we want to unfold the model, and it was kind of fine for the building, but sure, it will not be fine for the organic mesh such as skull. So we would want to go and open this stack and select edge, and we would want to click edit seams and turn off show map seam over here. If you don't have those two stacks and you would like to, just grab this border and move it aside. You can even have 3 stacks, 4, 5 if you are very into it, but I prefer to have 2. And you can click on edit seams while in edge sub option and start out mapping the seams. The way to do it is to create a T-shape seam, and let's not do edit seams but do point-to-point seams. So click on this point on this vertex and click somewhere here on the bottom, and it will create a seam using the shortest path from the first one. So go down like so. Basically show 3ds Max how to unfold the model. Click over here onto this vertex like so, and then let's return back to here and lay down a seam over here as well. But we wouldn't like to put any kind of seams on the face, because that would create a unnatural and unwanted cut probably somewhere in the face. Well, if we are very special and neat, it won't happen, but it's best not to ever put any kind of seams on the face directly. We will be doing this kind of secretly and laying down the seams where user won't be able to see it, or the player. And so we return that way over here. We come back to the first point and we want to create some kind of a T-shape seam. And also on the other side as well. So we need to return in the way we've arrived. Or we can just right click, I guess, yeah, and get rid of this seam tool. And then we can click on the vertex and follow the same pattern like we did before. Let's right click, hide unselected, and continue doing the point-to-point seams. Well, it would be best for us to give it another seam. We can go and press 3, go into the face mode, click on one of the faces and click this button here. So this expanded this polygon towards all of the seams, and because all of our model got red, it means that our seams do not cut out solid parts. So they all form somewhere nicely, and when we unfold this model, it will be one solid piece. And we can go into edit and we can go into pelt. This is probably something new to you. But it's just like a pelt where you would stretch the leather, and leather in this case is your skull, which has to be unfolded. So you would want to go and click Start Relax, and it will unfold the model slowly, and you can stop relaxing and even increase the speed at which it unfolds, like so, up to 0.3. Start relaxing, and decrease iterations to improve the performance if there are too many polygons, like this. And let's increase the stretch as well. We would want to reduce the simulation samples down to 1 probably, because we don't need this precision, we don't have so many polygons. and start pelting. And then once we've stretched it out, we can start relaxing it and keep relaxing until it looks fine, and until it seems that no polygons overlap each other. You can guess that those are two eyes of our model. Let's also relax the model using different approach. Relax by the face angles. You can also grab a hold of your pelt parts and move them aside using the vertices, and this will increase the pulling power of those threads that are attached to the vertices, and will change the direction at which those vertices are pulled. Now I'll show you a very brutal approach of how you can straighten those parts straight away. Just deselect everything and drag a line across to get those vertices out. Press Ctrl, grab other parts of the vertices, press Alt to deselect some of them, and just start the pelt. Then stop the pelt and start relaxing. And this gets them stretched in a nice way. Then when you're ready, let's close the window and resize your UV map to the desired proportion. Let's lay it diagonally because it's going to be bigger that way. And we can even rotate it. We've got our skull mapped out, and let's collapse down this UV modifier. Unhide everything. Select the high skull, go into the hierarchy, effect pivot and center to object. Select your low skull, min skull, and effect pivot center to object. Then select your min skull and click this button, align it with the high skull. Center to center, or pivot to pivot in this case. Align orientation X, Y, and Z. Align it according to position as well on those three axes, like so. You would want to grab your low skull and resize it to be smaller by a tiny fraction smaller than the high skull, and you can do it by pressing R, scaling it in relative mode by just entering here 99%, maybe 95, that's too much, 97. And we will be projecting now the dents and imperfections from the high skull to the low skull. So select your min skull, which is low skull as well, press 0 or go into rendering and render to texture. And this is the window which will help you to create the normal map for your low skull. We will be projecting details from the high skull, and so we will pick it, and we called it max skull, this one. Give it a second to think, and so it's projection. This thing applied to our min skull a modifier called projection, which is a cage that surrounds your min skull. We can open up the cage. Let's bring down all the amounts, like so, to 0, so that the blue cage surrounds min skull. After that we can increase the amount slightly, but not too much. This cage determines which parts of the high mesh will be transported onto the low mesh. So the bigger the cage is, the more details you'll pick up from the high skull, but the bigger the cage stands out from the low poly mesh, the less noticeable will be your bump map. So those projected details won't be standing out as much as they could had your cage been smaller. Let's make it shaded and see where it stands out or where it doesn't stand out. So if we decrease it, we can see that the black parts is where the high skull is sticking out. We can keep the cage very close to the min skull that way, but we will have to go into the vertex mode for the cage and adjust manually those vertices, like so, just for the cage. You can also use soft selection, which is a very good tool, and sadly I don't see many of teachers of other tutorials describing how to work with it, but don't forget about it. You can increase the fall off of the vertices that get selected with your current ones just by scrolling this bar here, and simply just pull out those two vertices and the rest will be pulled out as well in a fall off form. If you select, for instance, those two, you can increase the cage like so, and those two as well. Bring the cage up and to the side as well using the soft selection. And for the nostrils, very important, bring the cage out like this. Okay, the chin looks pretty bad, so we need to increase the cage amount there. And on the side as well, from behind. And once again, we can see those black parts sticking out just because we are in shaded mode over here. And we're adjusting the cage for our projection modifier, so we can create a normal map that will project from the high polygon mesh to the low polygon mesh and use it in-game engine. So the cage seems okay, maybe this bottom part. And once we're happy with the cage, we can continue working on this window. So we've picked the high polygon mesh, and this assigned the projection modifier to our low polygon mesh. So we can then go down, check what we are doing right now. It's normals map. We can delete what we're doing and add normals map. Above here, you wouldn't want to use the automatic unwrap because that would just ruin your unwrap UVW that you've just done. So make sure that this is at none, and channel 1 is okay. You would want to save it as a Targa file, and we will save this texture under the name MinSkull normals map Unity on the desktop in the Targa format. The size we will use is going to be 1024 by 1024, and the slot will be diffuse color. And also coming back up here, we want to change in the options. First option that should bring your attention is Global Super Sampler, and it should be max 2.5 star, and we enable it by clicking here, enable Global Super Sampler, and Super Sample Maps should be turned on. If it's not there, you have to go into Common tab and assign the renderer, which should be a default skyline renderer or a mental ray renderer. So for instance, this one will not work and you won't be able to render to texture. So this button wouldn't be glowing, wouldn't be available to press. Select the skyline renderer, and in renderer itself we select max 2.5 star, we close this window and we come back to this one. So we've just set up this part over here. Having done this, there is one more and very crucial part that you should pay very big attention to. When exporting to Unity the model and using the texture of normals, it requires you to change the green from down into up, and that the red orientation should be on the right. So red on the right, green up, and everything else should be okay. So use the cage should be on, and we're done here. So use existing channel, do not do automatic unwrap, and we're doing the normals map 1024 by 1024, which is set over here. We're saving it on the desktop as MinSkull normals map Unity in a Targa format, and everything else in the options we are doing the max 2.5 star in a scanline renderer. Red is right, green is up. And then, having the low polygon model selected, we can click render, and we will overwrite the file, because I've been doing kind of tests just to be sure. Overwrite the file, continue, and there are red parts that you'll see in a second. There you go. And those are the parts where the high polygon mesh sticks out from our cage. So we need to be more careful when doing this, but in my case it won't be really visible, and you will just see a very good change in a positive direction of the detailization of the low polygon mesh. So just try to avoid those problems like this by just altering your cage even further. But if you missed something out and you can't notice it in the game, it doesn't matter. So we'll close this. Our texture is saved on the desktop under the name of MinSkull, and we would want to click on our low MinSkull mesh, low polygon mesh. Click here, export, selected, and let's export this as Skull Unity tutorial and overwrite it. This one was the one we've exported to test with Unity, but back then it didn't have any kind of seams and it was not with projection on, so we'll just override this as an FBX format and no animation is required. Okay, and okay. If we go to Unity, we can position the window like so. Go into the assets, imported objects and materials, and in the imported objects, let's right click on here in the folder and import new asset. New asset can be anything you want. It can be your object in an FBX format, it can be a texture, it can be anything. So right now it's going to be our skull Unity tutorial. And we also would like to import another asset, our normals texture, which is over here. And right now Unity looks at it and just sees a normal texture, like ordinary texture without any kind of hint to be a normal. So we need to click on the texture in the project panel and change its type in the inspector from texture to normal map, and unclick generate from grayscale, because normal map has 3 channels to work with. It has red, green and blue, which are very cleverly tied with 3 axes, X, Y and Z. And RGB just tells the light that falls on the model where it should shine and where it shouldn't shine, depending on the normal of the model and the position of the light. So generate from grayscale, it's just gonna be 2-dimensional bumps made from black and white. Maybe good for scratches, but not for high details like this one. Another step further than normal mapping would be parallax occlusion mapping, where you would just take the UV coordinates and shift them away from the camera according to the way you would want them to look. And this would create very nice looking offsets from the model. So you could create an appearance of a very detailed brick wall just with having one plane with an height map applied to it through an parallax occlusion mapping. But right now we won't be looking at it, and we're just using the normals map. So we've set it to normal map and we've unclicked the generate from grayscale. All we have to do now is just to click apply, and we can position our imported skull in the scene and increase its scale to 10. Let's bring it up like so and prepare our light over here, because normal map is only visible when the light falls down to the model. So this is our low polygon mesh, and if we create a material in the project panel, for instance, if it's just a diffuse material with a diffuse shader, then if we call it, for instance, skull material, and assign it to our skull, either by dropping it here or dropping it onto our skull, or clicking on the skull, going into mesh renderer, materials, and assign material from there, skull material. Well, because it's just a diffuse material, we don't see any change. It's just a very basic shader which takes the light and shades out the borders to be more dark and the specular part to be in the front towards the light. But if we change this material from diffuse to a bump diffuse, this will have not only one slot for texture as diffuse had, but it will have a normal map slot for the texture where we can stick our min skull normals map. And because this material is applied to our skull, look what just happened to our skull. Well, it changed its appearance, and although it's still a very low polygon mesh, we can see how details are added to it. And if we change the light position, you can see that the shading is applied correctly, and this thing looks like it's made of way more polygons than it is actually. So if we come closer to it and change the light, we will see that the shadows follow the light very nicely, although there are not many polygons on the model itself. You can see that there was a problem with the normal mapping over here, so in 3ds Max we should have checked the cage at this point right there, and we wouldn't have this kind of anomaly. And this is exactly the red spot on the texture that 3ds Max indicated with. Another final tweak is that you could actually get rid of this blob over there, and it wouldn't be very noticeable. If it's something very small like this, you could go into 3ds Max after you render your texture and render it a second time, but this time go into options and unclick array miss check over here. So deselect it, close it and render, and you will not see any red spots on the texture anymore. So if we render it again, give it a second, and we will reapply it to our new material in Unity and compare the results. Let's import normals map, and although it was rewritten outside of the Unity has still preserved 2 copies for us, although the initial one is already overwritten and is actually this one. So we'll call this new, and if we get our material and assign new normals map instead of the current one, because we haven't set the new one to be of a normal map and generate from grayscale, we can see that this blob has went away. It is gone now, and the model looks pretty good. Well, with that done, I would just like to show to you what is going to be in the following series of tutorials. And I've been working on a artificial intelligence of the game, so just sit back and relax and realize what you can do in a couple of tutorials, which kind of artificial intelligence you can create on your own. So it's nothing that Unity provides. We're going to be creating our own artificial intelligence, and it's going to be very light on resources, so you can use very big amounts of monsters that can run around after you. Have a look at this. With this little project, I would like to show to you which kind of artificial intelligence you're going to be able to make after my tutorials, and just observe how many mobs are going to be running after you. I do not own the music, it's not mine, and if you have lots of bass in your computer, just turn it down, because the music will be pretty loud, especially the basses, and it's slightly scary. And the sad part is that if you don't have the Unity Pro, you won't be able to create the special effects that I'm using. However, the artificial intelligence is totally possible to be created, and can be created on any version of Unity, either Pro or free. So have a look at this. Okay, we have about 241 mobs running after us, and they are approaching the character which is in the center from all the corners. And you can see that there are guys on the right from the right room. They're coming out and they are coming towards me. So observe this. The whole queue of them is queuing up to get to catch me. But the game is scary and funny because they just stand there and don't do anything. Don't look at the graphics of the game, it's not the point. The point right now is to observe how artificial intelligence behaves. And I probably won't be having as many monsters in the game, but they will be with the proper animations, rigged, and very scary, because they will be crawling behind the corners and in the shadows as well. So you can see how I've tried to escape them, and they've traced me, and they are coming towards me, and soon they will flood the room. They are already fighting for which guy has to come out from the door first. And if we get out from there, if they let me out, we can try to push through them, and you can see how many of them. It's insane. And being able to create something like this just made me very proud of myself. So I would like to share it with you guys. And have a look. They're all coming after me. I can place down the lights and shine up for a split second before they go off. And while those guys are going through the bottom, the other half already decided that it's going to be quickest to go around the top, like so. And they're coming towards me. And finally, if we just go above here, all of them are gonna come and follow me. All the way up, like this. And if we change the direction, oh, suddenly they decide to go back with us and chase us. So the closer we come towards them, those are the special effects that the Pro version of Unity provides. The more distorted the screen gets, and the louder the music plays. And the further we get from them, the more silent the music gets, and the less calm the picture is. So you can stick the music in a free version, but this camera twisting and motion blur and line of focus will not be available to you unless you write your own shader. But the artificial intelligence, the music, and the gameplay is going to be available to you. So don't worry about the special effects, they aren't everything. Alright, thank you very much. My name is Igor Aherne, and you have been watching the third part of tutorials on how to create a